Okay, strategies, methods for securing value. How do we get what we want?
Talk about what we're going for now. This is how you get it, basically.
Okay, so there is the thing that you've heard about throughout the rest of this great land of ours, foreclosures and short sales. And in Manhattan, there were very, very few of those, particularly proportionate to the population. Property Shark had this feature where you could actually call up foreclosure sales on a map and get pins on a map. And I remember going to demonstrations and they showed us Property Shark in LA for foreclosures and just like red dots everywhere.
And in Florida, it's just one big red dot.
Yeah.
I mean, the entirety of Florida is one big red dot.
And then they did foreclosures in Manhattan, and there were like a couple down in the financial district, some up in Inwood, Washington Heights.
That's it.
Most of Manhattan was pretty clean. I think at the time there were literally like 20 or 30 foreclosures going on in Manhattan. This was in 2009. I should say in the majority of Manhattan. There were a handful, a bunch down in the financial district and a bunch up in Washington Heights, Inwood. But in the majority of Manhattan, very, very few. On the other hand, Brownsville, Bushwick, East New York.
Tweener neighborhoods or emerging neighborhoods got hit pretty hard.
Really got some.
Yeah.
Okay, so where you do typically find these, and there are some foreclosures still going on, some short sales. You can still find those if you're looking at properties in Bushwick, in Crown Heights, RC.
Even Crown Heights? That's kind of, isn't that reversed a bit, or is it still in a few?
There are a lot of different places in Crown Heights.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean the western part of Crown Heights, closer to the park and Brooklyn Museum and so forth.
That's fine.
That's pretty stable. But when you get east on
that makes sense. That makes sense.
And Crown Heights, just in its geographic definition, is kind of long and narrow, going from the Brooklyn Museum area,
Grand Army,
eastward,
east,
basically along Atlantic Avenue, both north and south of that. So it's a very long, narrow neighborhood. The eastern part is still pretty dicey, where it butts up to Brownsville.
Not a bad time to mention too, when a broker who's less honest than Bryce tells you when something's in a neighborhood, check it, because I've heard Park Slope from a broker extends all the way to 40th, to like South Sunset Park. I've heard Bay Ridge referred to as Sunset Park. I've heard Brownsville referred to as Midwood. I've heard all sorts of nonsense. So you have to really try to figure out what the name means as compared to the area.
Okay, so poor condition and eccentric space. If these are priced properly, they don't stay on the market very long. So if you're looking for something like that, you got to be ready to strike while the iron's hot. They do hit the market, and if somebody is cognizant of what they're trying to sell and prices it accordingly and figures in the renovation costs, those will hit the market when people are willing to grab them up. And the eccentric space thing, looking for kind of odd properties, things that have kind of challenging shapes, and really figure out how to use them in an inventive way. There are 10,000 other people like you who are looking for the same thing.
What just happened?
And again, they hit the market, they go quickly if they're priced properly. If you can find a motivated seller, somebody who has to divorce, is going through a divorce, but they have to move, they're being relocated, something like that. These can be great opportunities. Again, this is something where working with a broker can be helpful because you can start to get some of this background. Usually people who are motivated, unless they're really up shit creek, generally don't tip that hand because
they know it lessens their position.
Yeah, right. They're just open a feeding frenzy. But if you can find that sort of thing, it's great. Last thing is a strategy. If you're looking for a personal residence, there is something called a 203K loan, which is a FHA guaranteed loan that allows you to combine both the purchase price and your renovation price, your renovation cost into one loan product. So typically what you would be doing is making a purchase and getting a residential mortgage on the purchase, and then at a much higher interest rate taking out a construction loan, which requires a different financial analysis and so forth. The 203K in one mortgage product allows you to both make the acquisition and finance the renovations that you need. Now, what you do have to do with this is put together an entire cost estimate working with a 203K approved estimator and contractor prior to purchase and scope this whole thing out.
So FHA approved contractor?
Actually, I take it back. The contractor does not have to be approved. The estimator does have to be approved. So you have to work with both a loan officer who's familiar with 203Ks and an estimator who is qualified by the FHA to make the estimates. And with that, you'll determine the renovation cost prior to purchase, and then you can use this to renovate 1 to 4 family properties that must be owner occupied. So you occupy 1 unit, and you can have 3 income producing properties. These can be condominiums. You can buy a condominium unit and finance it through a 203K. And you can also use this in a commercial property. That is a
Mixed use.
yeah, mixed use. You
Yeah.
can have no more than 50% of the property be commercial, but if you had, say, a building that was a commercial property with a residence over, you can finance the purchase and renovation of that property through a 203K.
One thing we talked about last time too, and we talked about this, I don't know if we ever got an answer. Are we able to figure out if once you pay off part of the loan, like you have to pay the full loan out so you can sell your unit? Because the thing about the investing is maybe you don't want to be the primary owner occupier throughout the entire life of the loan. Do you have to pay off the entire loan, you think, until you move? We talked about this, I'm not sure if I got the answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll have to pay it. You don't have to. You don't have to carry the loan out to.
You don't have to hold it to term, yeah.
Right. That is, you can sell.
The other 3 units,
Right.
and then use the proceeds to pay off the loan and then sell your unit once you move. You can do that. So you can still basically, it's a soft way of getting into development because you can still use yours as a cushion, live there, and then eventually try to sell off yours to make the investment happen.
Right.
So you can also use this for like condo conversion as well, or
Not for the conversion, but you can buy a condo.
That's a good
Because you
question.
can't buy a co-op with a 203K.
That's
You
a
can't
good
buy a
question.
condo. So you can actually buy a condo unit. So if you find something that's not in great shape, and it's a condo as opposed to a single or multi-family property, you can buy that as well.
So if you find a
You
distressed
could not convert. You could not use the 203K to purchase a building and convert it to a condominium,
okay.
if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, like an
Yeah.
apartment to condo, but I guess not.
Yeah, no, you couldn't do that because that's considered a commercial transaction.
Okay.
Got it. So even if it was like, for example, a 4 apartment, a 4 flat with a commercial below, a 203K may not work because it's not set up as a condo already. It's just sort of misuse.
No. You could buy a 4 flat. If you had, let's say you have 3 units, 3 residential units plus a
Commercial grade, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that with a 203K, and then you can occupy. You would occupy 1 unit. You would have 2 residential rental units and 1 commercial rental unit.
And then you can convert it to a condo after construction's done.
You could do that.
Okay.
You
Good.
could then craft the plan and make it active.
Got it. It'd be a separate procedure at that point,
Right.
though, as opposed to buying straight out
And
of
you would
condo.
have to then close out the 203K.
I guess the long and short of this discussion is, while we're both cognizant of it, we think it's a great strategy. If you want to pursue this, not only would you want to bring guys like us on the team, a broker and an architect who'd also want to bring on very early your bank people, because that's often the first guy I talk to in all these transactions will be a guy like Bryce who helps you find property, and I'd be the second guy to help you renovate it. But in this case, the banker will really help a lot too, because they can help you navigate this process.
Yes.
It's something to be very aware of.
Okay, strategies, combining units.
Oh, sorry. Get you with that. Sorry. I forgot to give it to you early, yeah. Go ahead, sorry, Bryce.
Okay, so we were looking before at the values of co-ops versus condos and studios of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, etc. So one thing you could consider doing is to secure some greater value is if you can combine units either horizontally or vertically, you can actually realize some fairly significant savings. So as an example down at the bottom of this, if you had in a co-op, if you did a studio and a 1 bedroom, combine those 2 and look at the average prices. The average studio in a co-op is $330,000, $331,000 plus $570. You're looking at $900,000 for the combined purchase price, whereas the average price of the co-op 2 bedroom is $1.2 million. Right? So you're actually buying for $900,000. What is actually better than the average 2 bedroom co-op, because the studio, a 2 bedroom is really a 1 bedroom plus another 150, 200 square feet. When you take a 1 bedroom unit and combine it studio with that, you're getting a much larger apartment. So you're looking at a fairly desirable 2-bedroom, which you've acquired for significantly less than the cost of the average 2-bedroom. You are going to have to renovate, but even with this, your renovation, let's see, I have the number here somewhere. I lost it, but we're looking at what, close to 300,000, over 300,000.
So even a pretty
you got
decent
$300,000
renovations
to work
covered.
with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And that sort of thing. Now, in combining, one, you want to be discreet when you're making an offer because of who people who have those units know that you are trying to combine them. Well, suddenly they start working
The game's
together
up.
to bid you up. Right?
Yeah.
Once they, wouldn't they figure that out eventually, or?
Eventually, yeah, but you want to get an accepted offer.
Right.
At least from one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so, all right.
See, in co-ops, the board is going to have to grant approval for the combination of those units. So what you would do in that case is when you're going, you would actually write that into your offer that you have renovation plans that you want the board to approve.
And
You
without
may
the
not say it's about a
approval,
combination, but you say that my offer is based upon, my offer will be withdrawn if the board will not allow me to do what I intend to do. And then you go to the board with your proposed combination and get their approval. In combining the 2 units, you have to, by building code, remove one kitchen. That's completely
So that'd be
taken out.
totally awesome.
Unless you're kosher and you can prove it, in which case you can have both kitchens. And if you combine units, you cannot have to amend the certificate of occupancy. Thank you, Rudy Giuliani. Okay, subdividing units. You can do this and add a den, an office, bedroom, or bathroom. And this is something that requires a little more planning and calculation. If you find a poorly planned unit that could actually benefit from having an additional room added, this can be something that can add value. On the other hand, if you're taking a nice bedroom and subdividing it into 2 dinky bedrooms, which we see a lot of too, I don't know that you're coming out ahead of the game in that case.
Of course, what is a bedroom, by the way? Because this is a
What
real
is-
pet peeve of mine, personally. A while back, I was looking at apartments with a friend of mine, and they were told something was a junior 1-bedroom, which is one of my favorite misnomers. And we went to see basically a studio that had an alcove. And I was feeling feisty today, so I went to the broker gentleman and said, "This is a very nice studio." And he goes, "It's a 1-bedroom." I'm like, "I don't see a door. I don't see a window. What's your name? What's your license?" Basically, he started kind of turning white. You have to be aware that a lot of things in this sort of market, they'll try to tell you anything's a bedroom. They'll tell you a closet's a bedroom. They'll tell you a room with no light, with no ventilation is a bedroom. General rules are it needs to be about 70 square feet. It needs to have a window. It needs to have a closet. Now, it doesn't mean you can't really use it as a bedroom if it isn't any of those things. I've seen lots of home offices that are totally adequate to house a kid and or even houses your own bedroom, but it can't be marketed as such. Now, this rule is broken a million times a day. It's a general. It's fudgeable.
It's dicey. There have been brokers who have been held liable for marketing properties as 2 bedrooms, and sellers as well, for selling something or selling rooms that are not legally habitable spaces. So if somebody, and this is a very difficult thing. So if you have, say, a apartment that has, and you've probably seen these things, say a 1-bedroom with a home office. Right?
Yeah.
You can sell it as a 1-bedroom with a home office. You can only call it a 1-bedroom. If you sell it as a 2-bedroom, and somebody recognizes, it's a room that doesn't have a window, but I'm buying a 2-bedroom, and this is really cheap for a 2-bedroom. And then suddenly they realize, oh my God, this is not a legal 2-bedroom, but the broker told me and the seller told me that it was a 2-bedroom.
There's a problem there for someone.
And it can be very substantial liability.
Which is really weird because in this city, if you just market it even as a home office, no one's going to call boo and they'll still give you the extra money for the square feet because a home office in the city will probably end up passing a bed at some point. It's just going to end up happening that way. But you want to make sure that you're protected legally in that respect. So I guess some examples of this. We have one example of both strategies for some products I've worked on. The article I just flipped at you. Sorry, I hit you. This article actually explains the benefits we were just going over combining units. There's a couple of jobs I've worked on recently. I have the plans for to sort of do as diagrams. This is a job I'm doing on the Upper West Side that's currently in bidding for construction. This is a co-op on the Upper West in the 70s, and it's 2 1-bedrooms. And you can see, let me see if I get the mouse to move around. So basically, this is the wall that divides the 2 properties. And so basically, there's a few things you have to be aware of when you're doing this sort of thing. There's going to be some There could be some structural concerns. For example, whenever you're removing a wall, you have to make sure that it's structurally viable. It's not holding up the whole place. We actually had to do a couple of probes on that large wall you see in the middle to make sure that it basically wasn't holding too much weight on the floors above. Combining units, like Bryce and I were saying, only requires what's called an Alt-2 filing. An Alt-1 filing revolves around changing the certificate of occupancy of the building. It's a large expense paperwork-wise. It's a very large legal expense. It's very expensive. By combining apartments, again, due to Giuliani, you don't have to do an Alt-1. You do a simple Alt-2 filing, which is not nearly as problematic. One kitchen must be removed, so one of these kitchens will be gone in the renovation. And this example is shown as a horizontal combination, but there are vertical combinations to be done as well, opening up a stair between two existing apartments.
Is that relatively more expensive to do, like a vertical versus a?
It depends. Depends on the building. And depends on the nature of the construction of the building. So, like in a old wood joist townhouse, not a big deal.
Not a big deal at all.
In a
flat slab concrete might get a little
flat slab concrete can be a little more difficult when you're cutting a hole in it. If you're doing something like if you're in an old masonry flat arch loft building, it can be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah. And also with that too, you also have to remember the amount of space you're using. The stairwell does take up space, so when you do a vertical one, you lose a lot of space that way as well. Whereas when you combine things horizontally, you're often actually getting rid of hallways, which you'll see in this example. In fact, you're actually making space more efficient often. But still, the advantage of having an upstairs, downstairs in an urban area is great. Often I've seen people try to put the living rooms low or the bedrooms lower, so when they have friends over, they have people over, the lower neighbor isn't complaining about noise. That's something I've seen done in a lot of sort of renovations. A few examples of strategies on how to get through this. You'll notice that the window walls provide a great opportunity for repurposing space. Without large expansive windows, you'll have a little bit more rooms to actually add space. Web wall locations, the lower one will actually allow for expansion. You can kind of butt into it both ways. Because, for example, both ends of that are actually open, which is always a nice thing to have. And the existing electrical risers are being relocated with building approval. That tends to be expensive. That's something you can't always guarantee you're going to be able to do. A lot of buildings don't let you relocate risers, whether it be plumbing or electrical. So if you ever want to remove a wall, it behooves you early in the process to make sure that it doesn't hold something structural or service has to be cut, capped, and moved. This building has a record of allowing people to do that, so we got away with it here. So a couple things we're going to get done with this renovation. The existing hallways will be gotten rid of in this renovation, so we're actually going to gain some space back that's being used as circulation now. There's a lot of area in the second living room that can be repurposed, and the exterior of the existing kitchen might be able to give us a little bit of room there for a pantry. So this is the result, and this ends up being a 3-bedroom with 3 baths. And what we were able to do, we were able to add 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a walk-in closet, rather generous. We were able to add a pantry behind the kitchen. We reorganized the bathrooms. We were able to combine the living area and the kitchen area into a great room. So basically, we were able to get rid of a lot of circulation and both apartments had 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom. Now we have 3 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. So we've actually gained a lot of extra space here, plus a pantry, which is kind of useful. This is a couple that's having 2 new kids, so they're basically trying to expand their living space. So the area of the former living room becomes a 3rd bedroom and a master closet. It's repurposed very efficiently in that respect. We've made the master bedroom much larger than any of the bedrooms in the previous ones. We reorganized the bathroom, which in the original plans was much larger than it needed to be, to a smaller child's bathroom to go ahead and allow an entry closet for coats and strollers and such. And we're able to add a pantry storage wall. One of the 2 clients is a huge audiophile and has about 1,000 discs. So it's this entire wall dedicated to holding his music, his players, etc. It's a very slim wall, so it's able to have sort of an area for him to hide his prized possession away from kids kind of knocking it down. Sort of this extra space that's kind of nice to have in a building. And we were able to repurpose the dumbwaiter as an audio-visual closet. This building actually has a dumbwaiter that was defunct from a previous use on the ground floor for a restaurant, and they've actually allowed us to fire stop and close off the dumbwaiter on other floors as well to allow it to be sort of a storage closet. So we were able to add a master bath by putting the plumbing under the guest bath, the wet wall. Now, Bryce and I talked about this. Generally, for these sort of projects, moving plumbing is kind of problematic. One of the disadvantages of the more modern building is with flat slab construction, the plumbing usually only runs vertically. So moving a bathroom at a pitch, making a bathroom go a distance horizontally to a wet wall is almost impossible unless you have access to blow and there's drop ceilings, which are both kind of rare conditions. In an older building, sometimes you're able to go in the area between the cinder and the structure, go ahead and try to do some pitching here. Now in this case, we're just going to go ahead and raise the bathroom, so we're not going to go into this problem anyway. So the bathroom on the left is actually raised, and that way we're able to get the pitching below.
You'll see that like in a lot of lofts, you'll see bathrooms that are elevated on platforms, and the reason that they're elevated is because the plumbing is being pitched underneath. Right. Then in a lot of older apartment buildings, the floors were built as sort of a sandwich. And so there's actually a cinder fill area that's, oftentimes 8 to 12 inches deep.
Very generous.
So you can actually pitch pipes in that area, and it gives you the opportunity. It's almost like a raised computer floor for plumbing, in essence, right? But in new buildings, particularly new condos, because they're just concrete that is 4 inches thick, you cannot move any plumbing around unless you want to open up that, look into the neighbors below, get their permission to move things around, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see that rarely happens.
Of course, the advantage of a newer building often is because they know it's such a problem to expand off horizontally, they've put the walls often in places where you can expand to the back, and often they have open things. So 6 of one, half dozen other. You have to look at the plans sort of with your team and figure out where the expansion possibilities are.
Yeah, and usually, the older buildings would have, one bathroom and a maid's bathroom or something like that. Whereas, the new buildings are reflecting today's lifestyle where, you have 3 bedrooms, you have 3 bathrooms, and all likelihood are at least 2.5, something like that.
And certain formal rooms are no longer important. Many people don't care about having a gallery or having even a formal dining room anymore. A lot of renovations eschew that, just go straight to having a great room. We repurposed the existing kitchen as a pantry workstation, so actually we're able to reuse that plumbing. So I actually have a preparation area for children to go ahead and apply or to clean up or whatever. And we're able to add a kitchen sink and dishwasher because there's actually some plumbing in that wall as well. So we're able to sort of find a couple of extra plumbing locations. Now that's actually if you want to combine 2 units. Now the smaller units, this is an apartment in Brooklyn, and basically we're going to try to find a way to add a usable room such as a den or an office. Again, a bedroom has to have 70 square feet and sort of legal window and ventilations. And this example will be showing a room, adding a room and dividing one, basically finding a way to add a usable room in this plan. So strategies we have for this one, generally, the north wall again, you have sort of an opportunity for real purposing space. There's a couple extra windows there. The windows in the bedroom allow for splitting the bedroom into 2 rooms because you have ventilation for both rooms. And what ends up happening is we were able to create 2 bedrooms where there previously was 1. We're able to open a kitchen wall into a living room area. So basically we're able to open up the apartment a great deal. One thing this plan doesn't allow for, we're talking about efficiency of space and weird spaces. The bathroom in this plan is kind of orphaned. The plumbing wall is here, and this is actually the exterior of the space. So it's kind of a difficult plan because we weren't able to basically do anything with this hallway in this renovation, which is unfortunate. Because in a perfect world, this bathroom wouldn't be here and this whole space would have been claimed. But we don't live in a perfect world, and it was basically a non-negotiable move there. So we did the best what we could with the renovation. Bryce's point, notwithstanding of having 2 small bedrooms, this client sort of has a kid on the way, so they're trying to make it work. So they kind of had to go with 2 small bedrooms. Right now, actually, one of the people's a designer, and I'll be working on that bedroom actually. This is also negotiations.
It's almost that small.
They're almost 10.
By 14?
They're 10 by 12. They're not huge. Yeah, but I mean for the client's need, and the kitchen's much more efficient because the previous kitchen had an eating kitchen that, again, talking about reflecting current needs, is just too small for people to sit around and have.
The ones that drive me nuts are the ones that are like 6 by 9.
So anyway, and then a few things that came up from this, basically, we were able to split the windows, obviously, which allowed for the multiple bedrooms. The center wall makes 2 bedrooms at 11 by 9. This is kind of what we're talking about, which isn't ideal, but it helps the client here. We're able to put a new closet entry, so there is a separate entry there, so you're able to kind of allow to not have this space be wasted. You're able to enter from the kitchen side. And then the wet wall and sink, basically, we were able to talk about the cinder to run the sink below because it's a big cylinder building. So we're able to go ahead and put the pitching back to the wet wall. And then finally, the wall was removed to open space in the kitchen and living room. So actually, it looks, even though we didn't add any square footage, we made it 1 bedroom into 2. We've made it a much more open and welcoming space.
Is there a reason you wouldn't wouldn't cut it this way, and make 2 bedrooms like on the side, and then
It's a good question. The light quality, that is, I'm trying to remember real quick. That faces north, so the light quality from those windows is much better for living. We didn't want to cut it completely off. Plus, that also involved
Do which?
what I think you're asking is you were wondering why we just put 2 bedrooms here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, basically because it would only, if you cut it off here, the only light coming in the space would be right here.
Got
And
it.
plus, there's this plumbing wall to split up the room. So basically, you end up with a living room that's almost a cavern. So this allows adequate light for a sleeping use, as opposed to your daily when you're watching TV or having friends. It allows much more adequate light to be in that space. Plus, with the plumbing wall, if you divide this way, you also have a divider here that's not negotiable because the venting from the lower floors would have to be cut. So you really can't do that either. So this wall is not negotiable, and these windows are not negotiable. So at that point, we didn't quite go in that route. Plus, also by using the existing walls we already had, we were able to cut the cost of the renovation. So there's a lot of reasons not to. But it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to look at these sketches to try to figure out what is the best move. And then, of course, the window of the kitchen. Now that window of the kitchen's kind of been added, now you have sort of a much more light and open space. So those are just some demonstrations of some strategies of those 2 things. So other things you can do is you can add a mezzanine. And Bryce has an opinion about mezzanines, actually. Because mezzanines are limited to 1/3 of the square footage they're over. And
Right, but one thing you can do, if you have a space that has enough ceiling height, you can legally add a mezzanine as a ancillary area, which doesn't count towards area of the building. Unless there's a very famous situation of an architect in
Bob
New York
Scarano.
City, Bob Scarano, who completely abused this rule
on so many
in the
levels.
building code. See, normally you get, we'll talk about this shortly, a particular lot has development rights to it. So if I have a lot that has 10,000 square feet and my building is totally built out to 10,000 square feet, I can still add additional square footage in that by putting in mezzanines. Now, a mezzanine that's fixed in part of the building code does have to conform to certain rules. I think you need to have a 7-foot headroom in the mezzanine area, both above and below. So you really need like a 14.5, 15-foot ceiling to be able to do that well. But what you can also do is build, essentially like loft areas.
Out of furniture,
loft beds. So if you have, say, a 12-foot ceiling, you can put in a pretty decent mezzanine that's not really a permanent structure, right? And pick up a lot of area in doing this.
It doesn't have to be filed with the city if it's not permanently part of the architecture. But yet, if you spend enough money and do some detailing properly, it can look nice enough where it is, for all intensive purposes, part of the existing architecture. So it's really kind of a fine line, sort of a gray area that actually you can really sort of inhabit and do pretty well with, actually. There's a lot of examples of buildings that have done that pretty well, actually.
Yeah. And then there are a lot of buildings like the printing house downtown that actually do have these pretty cavernous spaces. You can put in some decent mezzanines.
Yeah. And roof rights and air rights.
Yeah, now if you can buy a unit on the top floor, you can actually break through the roof. Potentially, if you clear this with your co-op or condo board, you have to determine who owns those rights. But you can potentially purchase them, build up on top if there are still available square footage rights that you can acquire. Right, and an old colleague of mine did this in his building, very stealthily acquired, he had a studio apartment, he acquired the studio next to his, combined those 2, and because he was in the village, he talked to his board about getting the roof rights, and everyone on the board was like, yeah, screw it, we're in the village, can't build anything on these buildings, we have a landmark district. So they told him, go ahead, take the roof rights, they're all yours, go crazy, knock yourself out. And he actually, as an architect, figured out a way that he could build on top of the roof and avoid all the landmarks, avoid all the points of visibility that would control it by landmarks, and ended up making a 2-bedroom apartment that then had the majority of shares in the building.
He was not popular at the Christmas party.
Yeah, he became the controlling interest in the building from a studio apartment.
So they hated him pretty much from then on.
Yeah.
Whoops, yeah, okay.
Let's see what, okay.
And it's just sort of an example of, sort of visually showing how mezzanine would work. Basically you add in a space above a double height space. So things you can do at the building level as opposed to the unit level. And a lot of this goes back to the zoning conversations. So you can change the occupancy and use, which would, again, this requires an alteration type 1 usually, which basically means you have to change the certificate of occupancy of the building. It's a lot of expense, there's a lot more drawings, and you also have to bring it up to current code. Plus, it has to be in a zoning district compliant with desired occupancy. So, for example, you can't change a manufacturing building in a manufacturing district that doesn't allow for it into residential. So, it's something you have to really be considered about at the sort of zoning level when you're looking at properties like this. And we were talking earlier about separation of occupancy and use. You can have combined residential and commercial
But
occupancies.
just to be clear on this, I mean, if you're looking at 2 properties, and you say, I've got one, say a commercial warehouse building that I could convert into, say, 3 loft units, versus a residential building that's also 3 flats, and I could convert that into loft units. So essentially, in the end, I'm going to be getting a similar product. One salient difference is that if this is already an existing residential building with a residential CO, I'm not going to be paying nearly as much in filing fees and conversion fees as I would with the commercial property. There's a lot more regulatory and legal stuff we've got to go through with this one, to the tune of $12,000, $15,000 potentially.
And that's just the filing.
Just for the filing.
That doesn't include anything to deal with the bring up the sprinkler code. But let's say you have a warehouse building that's built in the 1900s. You want to bring it into lofts, and it currently has a business or a mercantile or manufacturing use, and it has no sprinklers. Well, to bring up residential, you have to fully sprinkle the building. That can be a building that's 6 digits. I mean, that can be 6 digits. It's a large amount of number, and you can make your money back provided that you factor that into your financial planning. But it's a consideration you have to be aware of if you're looking at properties that you're converting. And then I guess income producing. So there's sort of different kind of buildings you can get. Like a multi-family building, you can either occupy it or set it for investor only, where you either sell or rent out the properties after the renovation's done. Commercial.
Now, one thing to consider in this. Actually, we'll go ahead and.
That's fine. Go ahead.
I'll tag after you finish.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying commercial and residential mixed-use buildings. So, for example, you can have the residences again either be occupied, rent, or sell, and then have a commercial rental on the first floor that you basically lease out. Occupied buildings and rent regulated versus free market. A lot of buildings have existing tenants that you can't basically get rid of. They're unswallowable. They're just sort of there. Whenever you buy a building that actually does affect the value of what you're purchasing. So if you have a building that has a lot of long-term rent protected tenants, then you're going to have to understand that as part of the investment.
Which is actually like one of the things that's slowing down the apartment market in the Bronx. Or I shouldn't say slowing it down, but it's affecting the value of it. There are some people who just have businesses that are based on relatively low capitalization returns on rental units. And they're happy to have a rent regulated tenant. They don't really care because they're looking at just a long-term holding. But on the other hand, in places like Manhattan, where people are looking much more for sort of free market buildings, rent regulated tenants can be a real downer for buyers. The other point that I wanted to make about this is actually in all of these income producing things, one thing to bear in mind is that in getting into purchases like this, you're dealing typically in commercial lending as opposed to residential lending. And you're going to find that the interest rates are higher, the financial submissions that you have to make based upon the sort of cash flow analysis of the building are going to be much more stringent. That is, the lender is going to be looking very critically at what is the nature of this thing that they're going to be taking hold of. And last thing to bear in mind is that your loan term is going to be much shorter. You may be getting a 30-year 30-year mortgage on a 10-year term. So you may be paying mortgage at a 30-year rate, but the term of the loan is 10 years, which means that after 10 years, you're going to be paying a 20-year balloon, right? So commercial mortgages, there's a lot more financial activity and much greater stringency involved in that sort of thing. So just not to waltz into that lightly.
So again, when you're assembling your team of bankers a little early in the process, it would be on a straight residential line. Way early. Like he actually beats us to the punch at that point usually. Yeah.
In that case, in New York City, you're getting a fairly sophisticated
investment sort of thing, and you really want to have a team there. Okay.